Today I'm going to tell you the things that nobody else wants to tell you about being a magical practitioner, an occultist, a witch, or any kind of spiritual seeker. First thing is, research should be something that you want to do. I have over 20 years of exploration and experience and growing up in esoteric traditions. So I'm going to tell you how it is today coming from my experience. Research should be something that you want to do in your practice. While you don't have to burden yourself with academia, you should have a thirst for knowledge if your practice is more than aesthetic. I come from an actual tradition, and yet the tradition couldn't satisfy all of the questions I was asking, so I did go outside of the tradition so that I could look forward and go more in depth on the things that the tradition was touching on, but not completely diving deep into. My second point here is experimentation should not be used as a cop-out or a cover-up for not trying established practices or rituals. Oftentimes, practitioners will want to try a bunch of different things to say that they don't want to commit to a single path. I can understand that, especially in a globalized society where there's so many options and there's so many right things about many paths, to where you'll spot good things here and then things that you're not so fond of over there. So this makes sense in a place where it previously wouldn't have, because these two paths weren't exposed to each other. But oftentimes people are just doing that in an eclectic mishmash and it doesn't really lead to anywhere. That's besides the point for this, what I'm trying to say here. I think that trying established practices, even if it may seem uncomfortable at first, can have some significant takeaways for you. It does not have to be devotional. So traveling, I have partaken in various ceremonies that would be of a certain religious background or established mystical tradition. And I do not hold those views today, but for in the moments kind of committing to doing those actions and being receptive to that worldview, there were significant takeaways that I really learned from that would enhance my own practice that is completely separate from those in the future. In many respects, people lack the discipline to start and finish a ritual as prescribed from a specific tradition. That's why many, not all, but there's also this idea that I don't want to commit to something. But it's really out of a point of lack of discipline rather than some kind of idealistic reason. My advice is to try a practice as prescribed at least a few times. Rotate this in at some point, especially if you're on like the more beginner track. And that could be like, if you're really serious and you want to deep dive, I say no less than 90 days. If you want to really have a taste tester, do it 3 times. And if you want to commit enough to see if it's worth committing to in the future, try 2 weeks to a month. There's no way you're going to find out what you actually want to commit to without trying something as by the book as possible. If that sounds too strenuous, then maybe that path and its adjacent paths aren't for you, but you're really not going to know until you try it. And again, it doesn't mean that you have to surrender your soul to any kind of path to start that with, unless it is a ritual that requires you to essentially do that. But again, without an earnest effort, you're not going to know what you want to commit to. That being said, there are those who stick to established rituals and traditions and protocols. And while generally rewarding, I also have seen this result in people just being stuck in their ways, not improving their practice, because at some point, the practice will take a highly personal turn. As in, it forces you to actually implement your own personal touch to the path. Sometimes people take advantage of this too much. Like a lot of those preachers that say God granted them a dream, or they talked with Jesus in some kind of prayer and the rapture's happening 2 years from now or something like that, right? What this more commonly means for practitioners It typically takes the form of like dispelling an unwanted presence or a malicious presence. It could constitute manifesting a big result that is outside the bounds of normality. So it's not just like, oh, I manifested a giant donut because I did some spells for a giant donut and I passed a donut shop that has a giant donut on top of the building. Not that. It would be something much more substantial. It can mean overcoming a great fear or a reckoning of a fear you didn't know or suppressed for a long period of time. It could also mean an earth-shattering revelation for you. Like you're starting to accept a version of reality or some components of reality you did not really agree with or believed could be true because you had like such a strict upbringing, or maybe whether it's like atheists or religious. Just a worldview, something about reality that doesn't match that normal worldview. And so now you can't look at reality the same again. And sometimes this big ritual is an accumulation of all the things you've learned thus far, kind of combining into a ritual of your own that doesn't match beat for beat established rituals. Another point I want to make here is spirit work is not for everyone. I prefer to work with spirits. Most of my practice is working with spirits. However, the truth is that spirit work is risky and complex. There are many practices that center around the self or some kind of ambiguous divine. You can do a lot with your own energy. You can do a lot with your own inner divinity. But in a nutshell, you can pull from a higher yield energetically with working with external spirits than you can with just the self. My point of contention is more in a theurgic kind of way. Well, you see the manifesting crowd like really tap into this you're infinite kind of thing. A lot of these self-centric, non-theistic ways of thinking have a bad misconception of history and the practice that they say they're talking about. You see this with a lot of misconceptions, Western misconceptions on Buddhism, that it's completely about the self, non-theistic, your own self-divinity, and that is very narrow-minded because Buddhism, you just read the Book of the Dead, it's filled with external spirits, various kinds and echelons and parallel worlds, all kinds of things. I'm not even going to start with that kind of misconception when it comes to indigenous culture. It's a headache. Another one, though, is when you get these Stoic bros essentially glazing Marcus Aurelius and Stoicism, not understanding that Stoicism in the Aurelius variety was born and bred out of paganism of its day. Aurelius was a devout pagan and like really wrote essentially his own sonnets to the gods. So whether it's like these Far Eastern or even Western Stoicism, like reflections on the self, it's taken completely in a vacuum. It's not examined in the spiritual environment of its day and age, or like even geographically in terms of like the East. Buddhism today is very spirit-filled. So these are distillations of vast spiritual worldviews. Keep in mind, too, that magic will not fix your life for you. Classic argument is expecting a job after doing magic, but not sending any job applications out. So you don't get results. Magic plus mundane actions equals manifesting results. Keep that in mind. So let me interject some indigenous philosophy in here. Through an animistic framework, the material is divine and the material is magic. You could say it's this realm's extension of the magic. Nature and what can be found in its own digital and concrete jungles are sacred in similar ways to how their higher emanations are as well. Kind of take for granted how rare some of these things are, including a job application actually is. Keep in mind that most of the developing world, which is most of the map, does not have access to processes of employment such as that. To be in that environment, period, is kind of a magical blessing. Couple that with your own magical efforts, and now you're really breeding an environment that you can see results. And if you want to get cosmic about it, where's the nearest job application? Andromeda Galaxy, If that's too meta, well, you're also calling on very meta forces in order to help you. To humans, we take these analogies for granted, right? But to cosmic beings, it is seen as gratitude. Like, wow, my place here is special. Being grateful for your place in a universe that is so dark and empty is gratitude, and things will take that into consideration when helping you. Those forces will see you as an investment. Magic helps, and mundane conditions are the things that we want to change. It only serves us to utilize both and not to debate on which one is superior. Another major point is that in the modern day, the vast majority of magic and witchcraft or whatever is majority a solitary practice. I think for the future, this really needs to change. I understand that ridicule, alienation, fear, people taking social control are reasons to stay solitary. But the major pitfall of staying completely solitary is that you get no feedback, especially in arts that are completely unseen. If you really believe that these are real, you need feedback. Otherwise, it's just like some kind of feel-good philosophy to get you through the day. In a globalized society, we need spiritual discourse. We need discussions. We know through psi research, parapsychology, anthropology, that many traditions are drawing similar conclusions. No one tradition can claim to have the one true God. One truism farms the ground for dehumanization and eventually the G word. G-side. It's time for practitioners to come a bit more out of their shell and start congregating with others. This old school mentality of I only get my knowledge from the spirits. While I can respect some of that coming from like an old school practitioners embedded in old school communities, there's no reason for people that learned their stuff on the internet to be holding that kind of mentality. They live in more communal environments. Or I should say they live in more social environments. Keep in mind this whole, I only get my knowledge from the spirits. Psychopaths basically say the same thing. I'm not saying solitary practitioners are psychos, but without feedback, can you truly assess your practice? Kind of a soft solution to this is getting readings, but you do need to find a way to practice with other people, even if it's not the same exact path you're on. As social creatures, we need to find people that reflect our interests. It happens. It's important. We need people to talk to what is important about us and what is important to us. If you want to support my work, consider subscribing to the Mystery Codex on Substack or go through solomonpakal.com. It'll take you to the Mystery Codex. There I have deeper dives in the form of written articles, but all of my content is early access there. And you get access to my signature series, which contains sensitive material that can't be published on other platforms. Consider grabbing a tarot divination package or complete Mayan astrology chart reading package from me. That will be done through MayanMysterySchool.com. Link in the description below. Like, share, comment, and subscribe.